and welcome to another episode of Obsidian Extra Lives. I'm your host, player support specialist Chris Stanick, and I'm joined by our special guest, senior area designer Matt Perez.
Hey, how's it going?
How you doing today?
Doing all right, doing all right.
Awesome. We are going to be raising money for the Children's Hospital of Orange County, helping children treat illnesses, their families with support, and research to fight these diseases, something very near and dear to us here at Obsidian. And we had just wrapped up a 3-day, 50-something hour marathon, $28,000 raised, which was pretty amazing.
Incredible.
Yeah, that was great. And we couldn't have done it without all of you. And we're just going to keep it going. So Matt's going to hang out with us, play some Untitled Goose Game, right?
You know it.
It's always interesting when developers come on and they're like, oh, I want to play this. Mm-hmm. Or like, for example, Carrie wanted to play Broforce. I was like, wow, did not expect that, but sweet, let's do that. Mm-hmm. So what made you want to go with Untitled Goose Game?
I mean, just out the gate, I just think it's just a brilliant game and its simplicity. And I think, I'm a level designer, area designer, whichever way you want to call it. And I just love, this is kind of the level designer's dream. Mm-hmm. It's just place the player in a space with a bunch of tools and just have them solve things in a bunch of different ways. And I think this game just does that brilliantly. And it's hilarious. It's basically Hitman with a goose.
It is.
What can you not love?
It is. There's a lot to love about this game. You got first of all, I want to show you these beautiful eyebrows that Matt did for me. Got me touched up because mine are still growing in from being waxed. Do you remember the first game you played and what kind of got you into gaming?
Ooh, first game I ever played. I gotta think about it. So I used to stay at my grandma's house a lot, and my uncle had he didn't play a lot of games, but he just liked to collect gadgets. And he was like, I got this Nintendo thing. And he had a original Nintendo and a Super NES.
Okay.
And I remember playing, it was this game, I think it was on the original Nintendo, and you just ran forward, you had to jump over these cracks in
Is it World Runner 3D?
Might have been that.
Because your guy's running forward, there's cracks, there's pipes that you can bump into.
I think so, but it had a killer soundtrack. And in the background, you just saw this this tiny city getting bigger and bigger. And it looked so cool, and I was wanted to see that. And it was one of those first times where it's simple mechanic, really cool vibe, and a world that was just you just saw the toes of it. I'm I just want to see that world. And it just, from then on out, I was just grabbing every cartridge I could off the shelf. He had a Dick Tracy game that was strange and weird, and everything you could imagine. And from then on, I was off the races. I mean, I was playing Super Mario, and then Super NES, playing the original Star Fox. But I think it really crystallized when the Nintendo 64 came out.
Okay.
That was I just played tons and tons of Super Mario 64, just breaking that game in every possible way you could.
With that unbridled, there was no movement in a game like that until then.
Oh, it was revolutionary. I mean, to think of a company that could go from 2D to 3D, they had to modernize, right? 3D is coming, and how do we take Mario, that's a platformer, into 3D? Mm-hmm. And then it's we'll just revolutionize the entire platforming genre.
We'll create all the rules.
Yeah.
Camera, how you move it around, all these things. It's going to go great. So obviously you didn't just jump right into making games after playing them so much, or we'd all be making games at this point.
Sure.
But now you have lots of tools that you can.
Yeah.
After you'd kind of discovered this love and passion for games, did you pursue school that way, or you were kind of still
So I kind of when I was in high school, I was really, I guess I hadn't fully educated myself quite yet of everything that went into making a game. All I knew is people made them on computers, they used some dev software, and I just okay, the only entry I can think of to get in there is computer science. It's the only thing I could think of at the time. And I took some programming courses, and I could wrap my head around it, but it just didn't feel right. It didn't feel like this is my calling, just to lines of code and all that. I'm a very visual person, and I just, it just didn't click. And one of my other great loves is also film.
Okay.
I just love movies. I'm obsess about. I'd watch every behind the scenes you could of every movie I bought on DVD, and like just obsess more. Like I love the movies, but the movies I loved, I wanted to know like how'd they do it.
Yeah.
Like, why am I feeling this way when I watch Luke Skywalker look at the two sunsets? Like why does that work? And I just became obsessed with that. So basically, when I was like kind of nearing the end of high school, like I realized like I don't have the classes or the grades at the moment to like get into like one of those big tech schools like Caltech or things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I've done some art projects, done some little shorts here, then with a couple friends. It was all joking kind of stuff, but I was like, well, maybe I can try this like film thing.
Okay.
Like that seemed like something I was, also really passionate about. And games, like I think the industry wasn't as transparent as it is these days.
Absolutely.
And the tools weren't all quite there. They were getting there. So it just seemed unattainable. It's like, I don't know any of that, but I've watched all these videos. It seems like movies, like I kind of understand how those are made. Mm. So I applied to film school and I got in.
Okay.
But through a program called Digital Arts. And basically it seemed like the perfect combination because I was like, I love technology, I love video games, but like I also love film and everything that go with that. So it was like technology and filmmaking combined. And I studied film for several years, worked on a bunch of sets with some friends, made a short film of my own, and got time to like sort of nearing the end, like sort of junior year. We're like, hey, like, we're starting to think of like, you should start thinking about your senior project. What do you want to do? Mm-hmm. I'm like, like I got to figure out a crazy movie to make. And all my ideas were kind of like a little bit out of budget, you could say, of someone that's in college. And even then, like, you probably have to put up like 10 grand to do like even something like that's semi-small. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I don't got that money. I don't know where to find it. I don't want to like.
That's a huge investment for just like a a capstone to like a.
Exactly. It seemed like a lot, and I know I wanted to do something for myself, rather than crew another film, and all during this time I had taken a minor in game development because like I still liked it, but it wasn't like my focus at the time. And I took a couple level design classes, and I got introduced to UDK, which was like the first kind of iteration of like the very public-facing Unreal Engine that anyone could get their hands on. And I was messing around with that. I'm like, oh, this is really cool. It's very visual. I can like script really quickly in it with Blueprint. And I just had a wild idea one day. It's like, well, I can't afford to make a film, but it seems like I have all the tools to make a game.
Okay.
So I went to like this, like the thesis, like a teacher who's the chair of the department. Like, can I make a game? Like, it's digital, and it's art. And he's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure. Like, he's a really accomplished filmmaker, but didn't really wrap his head around what a game would be. He's like, go ahead, have fun. And I ended up making a game for my capstone, and got a bunch of artists involved. It was like this kind of big project for the little we did, because then I realized, oh yeah, this is a lot. I tried to make a survival horror game, full-on survival cinematic horror game, like Silent Hill, but set in like the Middle Ages with zombies.
Okay.
And basically, bit off way more than I could chew. But we had a bunch of artist friends, and like we made something that looked really cool. Gameplay wasn't quite there, but we scratched that itch. Like I could do something with this, and it was around that time, like, I started making some friends, at some community dev, like, get-together stuff. And, this hiring manager, Jim Rivers, years ago used to work here. He's somewhere else now. But he's like, hey, there's, like, an internship at this company called Obsidian, like New Vegas Obsidian. He's like, yeah, they got this internship. Not for anything like that, but it's like this little tiny project. They're just doing a Kickstarter right now. It's called Pillars of Eternity. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, I love, those old games, like, sure.
Yeah.
And yeah, I snuck in. They were like, I tested well, did a good interview, and I got in as an intern there. And 9 years later, here I am.
Wow. That's pretty wild, though.
So,
man, we just covered a lot of stuff. And I want to talk about Grounded more because people, I have questions about it, and like,
Yeah.
things like that. But I kind of want to talk about how when you came on to Pillars, and that was a crowdfunded game, right? Mm-hmm. And you came on as an intern.
Yes.
What was the most challenging thing coming on to that as an intern after basically attempting to direct your own game?
I mean, it was really interesting. I fully expected, sorry.
Problem. It's all good.
I fully expected, just understanding like maybe even what intern meant in other industries. Like, all right, I'm gonna come in, I'm just gonna like fix nav mesh, or I'm gonna like, create asset lists, and just kind of like observe the people making the game and helping them until they can trust me to make a game.
Yeah.
But that wasn't the case with Pillars. It was like they're like, you know what, it's just us. We're not a huge team, because that was even kind of a small team initially. Like, jump in, start making stuff, start blocking out some levels, let's see what you can do.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, and like, working with Josh and Bobby Knoll on that project, like, there was, some people had a lot of years of experience doing that sort of stuff. It could seem like a sink and swim sort of situation, but at the same time, I think it was helpful to have, people telling me like, oh, try this, try that, but also just giving me the space to try things. And, I tried some things that did not work out and tried some things that I was quite proud of, but it kind of was like a little scrappy as well in a similar way. I think for some reason
You're a fighter, I think. I think you're a fighter.
I work on a lot of scrappy projects, but so in a lot of ways, if I'd come into that with, not having a lot of self-motivation or not having a lot of, that sort of gumption, I think I benefited from that, like being in a position where as someone leading a project in school, like I had to kind of drive things.
Yeah.
And, I know when I worked on Pillars, like, I'm sure some of the designers could attest to this. Like, I would not leave their offices. I would just be like, what's this do? What's that do? Tell me what this, how this do? And like, please, we got to get some work done. I'm like, but I need to know, how does this all work?
So you were a sponge. You were in questions
and... But I think like you talk with any game developer, I mean, that's a quality of, I think, all of us. Is we're all hungry to learn, because the game development is constantly learning the game you're making. It's constantly learning new tools to fix the game you're making, and I think, you want the shoe, buddy?
Come on, it's a boot. You want this boot. Look at me, look at my beautiful little waddle.
I'm gonna put it back there. You can have that. You can have that.
I love this game. So one thing that is kind of similar between Pillars and Grounded is, so there was the backers and stuff that had come up with ideas and things like that. And then now Grounded is an early access game, and you're working with a community on feedback and suggestions and stuff like that. Were there any kind of unexpected challenges or good, great things or ideas you're like, oh, wow, like we didn't see it that way, or just the way that people were interacting with the game than how you originally expected?
I have one example that always tends to stick out with me, and it was the backer beta for Pillars 1, and this was like part of my first experience, working, in the world of video games and now streaming, right? You can watch people play your game like, live, right? Which as a developer is, really a valuable tool, I feel at times. Because you can just like watch and see, response.
Like unfiltered feedback,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, I mean, like obviously someone who's streaming, they're trying to juggle, chat and things. But someone who's just kind of locked in, just playing the game, has maybe a couple people watching, they're not saying anything, and just really kind of dial in on what the game's doing. And I remember it was this quest called Cat and Mouse, and it was early versions of it, but because I don't remember if it shipped exactly this way, but I remember there's a point where you're told by this person that's like hanging outside the tavern, and they're like, hey, there's this like murderer on the loose, and I think they're staying up in this tavern, like they're telling you this whole tale about this like horrible person. If you could like deal with them or help me deal with them, like there's something in it for you. I'm like, sick, okay. So you go and you get into the tavern. I was watching this player, like, oh my god, there's like this murder up there. Oh my god. And the way I had it set up is they're just sitting in their room, the NPC, and you go up and you open the door and you walk up to them and you talk with them, and then you have a conversation about them basically telling you like that's a lie. That person's just trying to they owe me something.
Yeah.
And it starts this whole game of cat
They-
and mouse.
Yeah.
But I remember watching this person like just like creep up to this door and be like, oh God, okay, like, this is gonna okay. They open the door and they're like, and nothing happens because I didn't set it up that way. I was just like, oh yeah, just open the door, you go talk to the NPC. Like you're gonna want to talk to them obviously, but not understanding that like it'd be someone who's just so wrapped up in the story that this person told them would consider opening the door to be such a tense moment and then almost feel like the air's let out of their sails when there's no like, hey, what are you doing? Or like something.
They catch them in the act of something. Or like this tension's kind of built up.
Yeah,
to then
and
I
changed it. I was like, okay, this is a moment that the player is expecting that the game is just completely not responding to. So I set it up so that when you open the door, they're in the middle of talking over something. What are you doing? You're like, and then it brings them in rather than them initiating it. They're brought in because the act of them going through that door is them saying, all right, I'm going to confront what's on the other side of this, not just talking with NPCs, just hanging out in a room. So and that happens all the time. Where you watch something and either falls flat, and you change it, or the game's done, you're watching it and you're like, well, I wish I would have known that, but or you're completely surprised that someone's taking it that way, and you're like, oh, I didn't think that was a way you could do that, but that's great. So yeah, there are certainly situations like that. I think in the same coin, like players are very perceptive of when something doesn't feel right, but it's also very difficult to determine, because games are so complicated, what is broken. So sometimes, they might say, oh, I don't like how creatures have so much health. Just as one example. I think we had that issue on Pillars at times. And they should reduce the health, and, that could very well be a problem, but you have to kind of take a couple steps back and say, okay, what is the core feeling they're having though? They're frustrated fighting a creature, and not feeling like they're having much impact on defeating them.
Yeah.
It's like maybe the issue is weapons are too weak, and the health is perfectly where it needs to be because it's going to scale correctly in that.
Yeah.
So it's also knowing when you have so much feedback, especially from a big community. It's like, what's actually the core problem here? Because we're all trying to figure that, both the community and the devs, and we all want the best game, but like getting there, you really have to think about what's the core issue actually. Is it that they may have much health, but it could also be a bunch of different reasons. And like, there's tons of GDC talks about this and things where it's like, oh yeah, like weapons are breaking too quickly. It's like, actually, maybe it's because combat's lasting too long.
It could be a variety of variables that are kind of.
So it's knowing what, also in a situation when you have backers and all that kind of stuff, like what the feedback actually means. That's probably the most important thing, because you could easily make a knee jerk, be like, all right, do what they say.
Change this, like
and
do this,
Yeah, you end up in a worse place ultimately. So that's a big part of it.
Like, what is an area of the game you're the most proud of that's like, that's me, like, I did that, like, this is, like, your stamp on it, like, this is Matt Perez's, like, area of the game, like, where you're like, I'm sure you're super proud of the whole game as a whole, but after working on it in so many different aspects, is there some part of it or area that stands out to you?
Ah, man. I mean, like, it is a huge group effort, and, obviously everyone, even if I feel there's a lot of myself in it, there's several others, probably the same exact thing. I would say just because it was like sort of the first, because I helped out a lot of different areas initially, just kind of like what was already built, and then like figuring out how to, change it and whatnot. But something that was pretty much almost a blank slate that I worked on was pretty much like, so you have the flagstones. So if you're looking at the yard, I'm trying to remember, it's like sort of the west side of the yard, beyond the flagstones, basically where the picnic table is, the sandbox, and the trash can. I worked for a long time basically designing that whole area when it was just what was originally there, which was just the sandbox. There wasn't trash, and there was just a picnic table. And I was really happy with how just the whole flow of the area turned out, where you're going into the Black Ant Hill, but there's different ways to get in there. To get into the sandbox, either just build over it, or you can figure out how to get there through the picnic table or through the trash heap.
Yep.
And, like, just the interconnected layers of that, I was really happy with how that felt. And then I was just really happy with how everyone else's contributions just kept building and building on that till, eventually it turned out to be the Hot and Hazy update. We released it all, and I think that was largely one of our biggest updates.
Yeah.
I remember the community loved it, and we were all super proud of pulling that off, because it was a lot to get done in the amount of time. Yeah, I think I'm proud of that section of the yard. I mean, I also worked on some of the end game sequences, and those took a lot of work as well. But that one, just because it was the first, major chunk of the area that I designed for the team, really, and that it turned out, as some really cool content. I was really happy with that.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
I think that's really cool. I also loved the sizzling and the shade and the desert biome. Like, it all just tied in really well, because I don't know if you ever walked on a beach with hot sand. It burns.
You try to find that umbrella, and you just stand
You're
underneath
just
that.
like, oh my God, please.
Yeah, and that just came from us asking the questions, like, we want to do the sizzling thing, we want to do like hot, just playing a bunch of different ideas. I think there was a moment, it's like, I really feel like it'd be cool if you could just dart into shade, or even better, you could build your shade, and I'm still amazed that we were able to pull that off, like, from a technical standpoint.
It's a really cool area. And when the shadows move, if you stay in the shadow, you stay cool.
And I was like, once we got that working, I'm like, oh, this is awesome. This is awesome. Like, because every now and then as a designer, you have some crazy idea, and after that point, I'd been in the industry for quite a few years, that I'm like, I know, like, I'm happy with saying this is C priority. So I was like, no, I can do that. And I'm like, you sure? Yeah, it's actually half working already. I'm like, all right.
Thanks for joining me, man.
Yeah,
this was really cool.
Delightful.
I got to learn a lot of interesting things. The game is unrealistic. You can't bite people. Maybe we're just controlled geese. Yeah. We're very controlled.
We're just
Anyways, thank you so much for joining us, telling us about all the interesting things and how it was creating Grounded's world, and just your story and how you game directed as your first game, which is kind of wild.
It is weird.
I look forward to whatever you get to work on next.
Thank you.
And I hope to have you on again.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I'd love to come back.